Hello, everyone. And today we have a little twist in the Miraculous Being show because we are officially hitting our 150th mark. So, this is going to be our 150th episode. I know it's a huge, huge milestone and a long way since when we started in 2019. So, we thought of doing something special here. That's why you also see my dear friend Manisha on the screen. We thought we'll do a little bit of a role reversal, and what we thought was that Manisha can actually ask me questions and we can go into the Being Miraculous journey so far. And Manisha here is someone who I deeply, deeply connected with only recently, but it feels like we've known each other forever because so many themes around what we talk around being miraculous. I think Manisha is the embodiment of it in terms of living with self awareness, being empathetic and kind, and always curious. And when I thought of planning this episode, there was no other person I would have rather asked to interview me. So thank you so much, Manisha, for saying yes and for being here. Really grateful.
Shwetha, it's an honor. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I think it's a huge milestone, and I feel so touched that you chose me for this. I follow your work, and I'm also a huge fan. So I can't wait to get to know more about the journey behind this podcast. But before that, I'd love to know, how does it actually feel to hit this milestone 150 episodes?
Gosh, unreal, right? Unreal. And like I said, it is, I'm so used to being on the other side of the microphone that this feels special and surreal. I think I was just reflecting back. I would probably say that this is the longest creative project I've ever undertaken, right? But we started in 2019. So almost about 4.5 years of doing this, and still feels a little like I need time for it to sink in that we did actually cross that milestone.
Yeah. And for you to sustain this over 4.5 years, it would have taken something significant, some significant spark or inspiration. So, what's the inspiration behind being miraculous?
Gosh, okay. So I'll probably share that in two parts. One in terms of the journey behind Being Miraculous itself and how the podcast came about. So Being Miraculous honestly started off as just a travel blog, right? In 2016. So it was in my peak corporate years where everything was supposedly thriving on paper, but I was starting to feel that disconnect very early on. And it was that journey of questioning, saying, is this it? Is there more? What is there more? And really exploring where I come alive. So it started off as simply a travel blog until someone pointed out to me in 2018 saying, Shweta, we can't find even a single itinerary on your website because I would only talk about life and living. So all my travels, all those moments where I came alive or something that really opened up in me, those are the things that I used to talk about. And that's when it actually came like an aha moment saying that that's true, that while I say it is a travel blog, I actually talk about life and living. And that's how in 2018 December, we rechristened the blog to Being Miraculous. And the journey, honestly, I'm not very good with names. If any of you know me, you know that I'm very, very bad with coming up with names. But somehow this clicked in the sense that a lot of my journey was around seeking meaning and fulfillment. There was a huge void that I felt was missing in my daily life. And when I read about the word Meraki, when it said, when you do something with all your heart, all your involvement, all your presence, with devotion, that sacredness was what I felt was missing in my current life. And I said, wow, won't that be wonderful if we could live every day, every moment with that centered awareness to really say that how can I contribute or make, add value to whatever it is that I'm doing and make a little difference in whatever small way we can, right? So that really touched me in a way that I didn't expect it to. And I said, if I were to live life, and I found a noun version of it, which was to live life miraculous, I said that will be amazing. That I would and I also loved the how it had a sound of miracle in it. Even we actually look at every ordinary moment and turn it into extraordinary. And that was my journey that I was getting started on. I would say in retrospective, the name fitted in. When I started, it didn't have it. The only thing I was looking for was meaning and fulfillment. But now, when I look back, miraculous is everything that we do in being miraculous in terms of how do we really find the sacred in everyday moments? How do we really transform the mundane into something beautiful? And the being part of it essentially came because I was a corporate hustler, came from doing, 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 never really thought about what being meant. And that's something that I always said that someday maybe I will write a book on being, about the art of being, because it's just so far from who I used to be that I felt like being is a great part to balance the doing part of doing with involvement. So that's how Being Miraculous came together in 2018 as a format. But the podcast honestly started purely out of a whim. It was one of those spaces where it had been almost close to a year since I started meditating, 6 to 8 months since I moved out of my corporate job. So much identity crisis, confusion, lack of clarity and certainty. But through it all, I felt like, I was learning almost every single day, every single moment. There were just so many insights that were emerging through my self discovery journey. I felt like I was shedding layers and layers of those insecurities, doubts, fears, and it was all too subtle. And I wanted to create a space where I could structure it, internalize it, all of those learnings that were coming to me. And I said, what if I started it as an audio journal? Because by then I was anyway blogging regularly. I said, what if I do an audio journal that just captured my insights on life and living? And that's how we started in October 2019. I literally Googled the first free software on my laptop. I didn't have this fancy microphone. I just spoke into my laptop and I sent a demo episode to Hubhopper Original. No podcast strategy in mind, no equipment, and they accepted it, and that's how the journey started.
Wow, that's beautiful. And what was coming to me when you were walking us through your journey was how this is also um, opened the path for the unfolding of your life's philosophy as it is today.
It did. I always jokingly say that I am Being Miraculous's first customer. We've all heard that, right? That we teach what we need to learn the most. And I think 2016 Shweta definitely needed to learn the art of the art of living, the art of doing things with involvement, the art of detaching her identity from all of it, to really believe in herself, to be
Mm.
able to contribute whatever is her gifts to the world. And I think Being Miraculous definitely helped me find all of that.
Wow. Thanks for sharing, Shweta. These this journey of 150 episodes, I'm sure each one of these have been special. And this is going to be a tough question, but is there one which feels really special and personal?
Ah, very, very tough question. I think there were just so many incredible moments throughout the journey. I would say the first time I had ever a guest speaker on the show, the first, the Thriving for 30s that all of us contributed to
Oh,
in
yes.
that episode. Conversations with Apurva Purohit, Marsha Reynolds. I think all these people that I really look up to be able to have conversations with them and have their insights shared on the show. I think all of them are very, very special. But if I really had to choose one, I would say would be the episode I did with Prasad Rangnekar. It was an episode that I did like every other podcast episode, right? I usually resonate with the person's body of work, reach out, open up,
Mm.
have a introductory conversation, and then set up like a call. But something about everything that he said, every word that he said in the podcast episode resonated so much with me that at the end of the recording, I asked him, saying, would you be my yoga teacher and mentor?
Ah.
And I was surprised even as the words came out because I've been a very independent person, the logical two by two, never really seeking help, always trying to figure it out on my own. And until that point, I think I've only looked at books as my teachers. But I don't know what happened in that conversation. I asked it, and as soon as the words came out, there was a part of me that recognized also. I'm like, did you really say that? But I did, and it has been such a beautiful journey of learning with a live teacher, to have somebody to kind of back you in your journey and to guide you in the process. I think that has been very, very special. So if I really had to pick, it would be that.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And from the other side, your listeners, I'm a part of your community, so I know what a beautiful community you've created. From your community of people who follow your work and your listeners, has there been a message or a feedback that was really touching and memorable, which conveyed the impact of the work that you're doing?
Yeah. I mean, now I'm blessed that there have been many, many, but I think one that always stood out to me was something that came into my Instagram DM in March 2020. And it was from a girl who said that she was on the verge of committing suicide, and something about the podcast really stood out to her, and she stopped herself. And
Mm.
she shared it with me, and then we had many conversations after that. But I think that was an awakening moment for me because I realized that this was no longer just about me or capturing my journey, right? Which is what I started with in 2019. So 6 months into it, when this message came in, I realized that this platform can and should do more, and that
Mm.
it was meant for a much larger movement. And I
Mm.
think her message, it just always centers me in terms of what this work is about every single day, every single episode that I record, that even with this platform comes such a huge responsibility and to do it well.
Yeah, I love how the conversation is flowing because it's bringing me to my next curious question, which is that, with each episode, there's awareness. And like you said, there's responsibility. Let's deepen this, and I'd love to know more about how have you seen Shweta evolve through the journey of this podcast?
Yeah, I think uh, I think it's been a very fascinating journey, and in a lot of ways, I feel like I grow with being miraculous too. So the deeper I go in my spiritual journey, that the more I have to offer in terms of how much deeper others can look at themselves in this journey as well. But I think it began like that. It began from a very, I would say, selfish interest in terms of really trying to figure it all out because the crisis that I was going through mentally, it was a way of recording, capturing, and saying, what is happening within me, right? Because externally everything was okay, but a lot of us identify so much with our jobs that when we moved out, to a large extent, I kept asking myself, saying, okay, who am I? If I'm
Mm.
not that, who am I? And that question opened me up to such a deeper core existence. And I said, okay, so it was more a way of finding answers for myself. That is where the journey started. And somewhere along the journey, I think there was a point, an inflection point where I reached where I said, why didn't I know this before? Why didn't somebody tell me all
Mm.
of this, right? Like, why am I having to discover it the hard way? Because I was like, if somebody told me all of these things in a much younger age, I probably wouldn't have had to go through this doubt, wouldn't have had to go through this identity crisis. And that's where I said, okay, I can't keep this to myself. I should at least talk about it. And at that point, I didn't have any big goal or dream saying that, oh, being miraculous will be a business. It wasn't. I actually was running a content marketing business, which was my bread and butter. Even post my corporate journey, there was no uh, financial intent behind the brand at all. And I just said that, people should just hear it. And at that point, I said, what, maybe my mom and my sister would listen to a few episodes and say, good job, right? I was like, that's about it. And I was okay because that was all I wanted, saying that even if one person heard this and it made a difference, that was enough. And that's how it started, saying that can it make a difference to one person? And then I said, when I went through that journey, what I also realized was that it's a very lonely process. Uh, and whether we like it or not, nobody else can do our work, right? It is up to us to do it. But I said, can it be made more fun? Does it have to be it is lonely, it is very difficult, because looking at our own inner demons and the darkness and embracing that, like with the compassion that we've still not arrived at, right? So we cultivate compassion the more and more we do our inner work. So I said, can we actually have a community around it so that it doesn't feel so cumbersome as a process, that it actually is fun, that you realize that, oh, I'm not alone in this journey. So it was a maybe a need that I also had in my journey, along with the need that maybe there is value in it, in doing it together. Because what I used to notice was that I had a very deep amount of self discipline. I didn't need anybody to hold me on track, or to ensure that I meditated every single day. I would never needed external support, but I did see that a lot of the initial people that I would engage with would drop off because it was not happening for them, right? So then I said, okay, maybe there is a need for a community around it, so that people actually stay on track. And I think each of these have also been realizations on my journey. And I think another step was when I realized that uh, even in the beginning, when I did have a community, it was all about me offering things to the community, right? And then I realized, wait, there is just so much that each of us carry within us. And I said, if we were to learn from each other and not really have any reliance on me to be a guiding light, because that exhausted me very quickly, right? I said, what if we sought help and asked each other and kind of figured out how to grow together? And I feel like that's the journey we are at right now. I'm sure there'll be more ways that we continue to evolve, but that's where we are right now, that we have a little community where we do kind of help each other out in the process. And I would definitely say that, yeah, every step of the way I have grown with Being Miraculous, in terms of my intent and my purpose also growing larger, wider, more generous, and more compassionate.
Mhm. Now, I think as we're getting into the conversation, I'm also realizing how multidimensional it is, right? Rather than linear, where it feels like, growth in all directions with people. Have there been any challenges that came, in your way as you navigated this journey of 150 episodes?
Innumerable, but I would say all of them will come down to one word, which is consistency. With all the number of things that I was juggling. So while initially it was the business and the podcast, and then getting into my coaching journey and the podcast, building a coaching practice and the podcast, then writing a book and the podcast. So it was always the podcast plus many other things. So it meant that I had to do a juggling act. And more often than not, of course, I slipped up the ball on many things, including the podcast. But I think that was also a lesson in terms of really being compassionate to yourself. And it has always been fun on how I find my way back to podcasting, because in a way, what I realized was podcasting came very effortless to me, in terms of being able to research somebody's body of work, to have conversations, be tuned to what my listeners are looking for, and find those answers. It has always been a curiosity kind of a project, and that has always excited me in terms of being very effortless. So even today, if I were to record podcasts back to back or on a Sunday, I would never feel like it is work per se, maybe because of the way it started. So it kind of helped me to keep coming back. And somewhere I think also having that intention as to why am I doing this, right? And if I were to keep going back to that, saying that maybe someone somewhere out there needs to hear this, right? It's not for me, it's not for hitting a certain milestone of downloads or numbers, but it might be just that one other person. Or and many times it has been me that when I have structured and synthesized my thoughts and put them into that format, so many things have become clearer for me. I probably wouldn't have actually received the insights I did, or remembered the insights for as long as I did, if I hadn't actually converted them to a podcast. So I think challenges would be just being consistent with it, even and there have been a lot of breaks. And also because the kind of work that you do, it's also based on where you are energetically, spiritually, emotionally. So there were times when I wasn't there and I didn't want to put that energy out there in the podcast. So I had to consciously say that, no, this is not the space from which I want to do it. So yeah, I think it's a lot of challenges, but I would say the highlight of those challenges are the many ways it kept bringing me back, no matter the number of detours, no matter the number of interruptions in the process.
No. Any fun trivia while you were getting back to podcasting and, doing all the serious stuff? Have there been any fun instances which you'd like to share with the listeners?
Oh gosh, I think the entire process has been a journey of exploring things on a whim because, like I said, I never had like a podcast strategy in mind. I just started by recording episodes here. So, somewhere I think about a year into the podcast, I said I had to really take a reality check. And I said, Shweta, what are you even talking about? Because there were just so many different topics. And I'm someone who likes to go with the flow more in these kind of creative things, at least. So, I would just like, set up a time for recording, jot down a couple of points and say, okay, what is it that I want to speak about today? So there was never a strategy or in structure or the show formats that we currently have. And then someone actually said, they said, maybe you know what you're talking about, but for the audience, they have no clue, right? Because they're just listening to what you're sharing and they don't understand how they all sit well together. So I actually then they took a step back and said that, okay, what are the formats that I wanted to do? And that's when this whole own your everyday or deep dive actually came into the process because I was like, okay, maybe I need to offer some kind of structure to my audience to say, okay, if you're looking for this, this is where you go to. That's where we also branded a guest segment and said Miraculous Beings as a show. So we have 3 segments in the show. It actually happened because a user said, they were like, we don't, what you're saying is nice, but we don't really understand why you're saying or where it's coming from, and we don't see the link. So, like this, it has been like interesting feedback that has come in, which has helped me shape. The other thing that I've done from very beginning was I realized that I'm not very good at impromptu speaking. So when I would not actually script it out, because I think I identify as a writer first. So for me, it was very important to write all of it out. So just on the fun ones, I think I said, let me just riff on it because I was like, I know enough about this topic. It was really bad. It never went out to the world. It was completely shunned. And then after that, what I did was actually script out the whole thing and then recorded it again. And I realized that, and I think it was 2 things also. One was I felt that I took much longer to get to the point when I hadn't
Mhm.
written the script before. And 2, there were just too many filler words. If I had to actually edit it out, it would have taken me years to edit out all the rights and the ahs and everything else, right? See, the right came again. So that's where I said, okay, I really need to do it. So it has been a lot of these bloopers. And I think only once we lost the recording of the interviewer. It just didn't get captured. So we used a platform to do the recording. I think I'll not name the podcast platform. It was good for most part of it, but it we had done the recording. It was a beautiful conversation, again free flowing. Didn't really have a plan and everything. And afterwards, when I went to download the file, there was no file. There
Mm.
were just bits and pieces of audio available, but there was no video file. And that's why, if you notice, there's this one episode, I think, which is 62, which came in after 85 because we had to again find the time with the speaker, record it, and do it again. But yeah, I think I'm just grateful that happened only once because it was a nightmare of a crisis to deal with and go back to the speaker and say, I'm sorry, but can you do the whole 1 hour again?
Oh, Shweta, what you shared was so relatable in different ways. When you spoke about impromptu speaking, um, I could relate to it because I think even I identify as a writer, and it's so good to hear that there's someone else out there who feels the same way, and likewise with the structure. And I think ideas don't come fully formed, right? Like there is a process, and I think that's where writing and structure help us because the we just imagine that the idea would just drop. But
Yeah.
I think the synthesis is a journey. So was so relatable. What you shared is so precious.
Absolutely. I still have all the 140 podcast scripts. So, like, literally written down. Like, all the interviews, of course, are free flowing, but the solo episodes, every one of them, it can be published as a blog. That's how specific the article is.
Wow. It also gives a glimpse into the effort that goes into it. So
Yeah.
thanks for sharing that.
But that's the thing, right? It doesn't feel like effort almost. It's it's like a natural outflow based on what you're experiencing at that moment in time.
Ah,
It doesn't exactly feel like an effort when I look back.
mm, mm, wow. What's your vision for the next 150?
Yeah, I think a part of it is something that we've already started with the Thriving in the 30s episode. I have really been yearning to create something that is timeless and evergreen and available, maybe, for people 20, 30 years after also to come back and find value in it. So I think from being on the spot, impromptu kind of audio journals from where we started, now I think the next vision for the 150 episodes is to really create very meaningful content in a way that is easily digestible, but also in a way that is evergreen, that it can apply to generations much after us, right? So my vision is to really create that content which is we are planning like a couple of series of shorter episodes, so it'll be like 30-minute episodes, but it'll be like a series of episodes that add up to one whole topic, because what I've realized is that a lot of these topics that we talk about is not that you can dip in 1 hour and actually grasp it. So the question really was that how do we break it down into more digestible bite-sized content, but at the same time also make it applicable. So I'm reaching
Mhm.
out to certain guest speakers where we are talking about more practicality, while we might be touching around topics around spirituality or Eastern wisdom and the scriptures and things like that. How can we really apply it in our day-to-day lives in a much more effortless manner would probably be what the next goal would be.
No, thanks for sharing. It's very interesting how, you're envisioning and how you've really arrived at that journey, and you shared that the source is your quest for meaning and processing your experiences. Can you tell us a little bit more about the creative process of how you come up with, so much depth and um, your whole process of scripting. So from start to finish, what does it look like? Um, Ever since an idea appeals to you or you get inspiration to, when it reaches your listeners as a podcast.
Gosh, yeah, I think it's a long process. It's not something that happens overnight, for sure. I'll probably say that there are layers to it, and probably the foundation of it, like you said, the source is my own quest for answers. And I think the process of my own quest for answers is through, I'll say, reading, walking, meditating, and conversing, right? I would probably bucket them into these four. Reading, because I feel like it opens up a whole other world, a whole other perspective of thinking. When I was in the depths of my depression, also what really stood out to me was words by these authors who told me how different life could be beyond what I could have ever imagined. And that opened up a whole new world. I said, oh, when I read Power of Now, I was like, oh, this could also be a way of living. And I think I've always continued using reading as a way to open my mind up to newer possibilities. And I love walking. I think my best ideas come when I do those long walks, if I can, without the phone, without the headphones. I know I'm a podcaster, but while I love listening to podcasts and walking, there are these walks that I love, which are complete silence. And in a way, I feel like that is where in my head I connect different aspects, like that insightful aha moments of, oh, what I read here applies here. And if it is applied in this way, it is so much more magical. And I think I draw all of those connections when I walk around. And because I'm in Mysore now, there are beautiful lakes to walk around. So that makes it even more special. Uh, Once these ideas come in, I think a large part of it also comes from conversations with people. What I've realized is that sometimes we are so wired to look at things in our way that when I have these conversations, and I love this, I say, if anybody wants to talk to me, all they need to promise is a cup of coffee, right? And I will come over and it'll be a great conversation, because I just feel that there's so much we can learn from each other. One of the reasons why miraculous beings happened also because I said, why am I trying to figure it out from scratch all by myself? There's always someone who's probably done it a little better, and they have a way of seeing it which might be completely, out of reach for you because of maybe your belief systems, your conditioning, your wiring. So I'm a big believer in conversations to really open up those horizons a little bit more and say, oh wow, this is another way of looking at it. And last, of course, is my most sacred process, which is meditation. I really feel like that is a process that helps me synthesize, integrate, bring all of it into me, and then give me a clarity. I think all of this is what helps me in my quest. And the creative process really is that I have this notion sheet where I say ideas. And whenever I get any random thought, that's where it goes. It's not a fully fleshed thought. It's just very simple things that I would have probably noticed, or maybe I was reading something and it stood out to me saying that this is a very interesting concept, and it just keeps getting added there. I also am a maniac who has a WhatsApp group for herself, and I have two WhatsApp groups for myself. One
Wow.
where I put in all these miscellaneous admin things, and one which is self reflections, which is only for me and only has reflective thoughts that I want to probably go back to. So these are ways that I use to capture these ideas in the moment. And I'd like to say that I'm very disciplined and methodological about how I flesh out the pieces, but honestly, I'm not. That is one thing that I'm yet to crack in terms of having a daily writing habit, but more on that later. But what I usually do is that whenever I have the inspiration, or when I know that whatever scheduled episodes we have is running out and I need to actually plan for the next set of it, I build out from these ideas and really look at what is standing out to me. Sometimes it could also be that I've written out something as an email, or so every week in the Being Miraculous community, we send out a newsletter, which is more like a letter to the heart, letter from the heart. And it could be something that I'm reflecting on in my life at that stage. So if there is something that I feel has value enough to be an entire podcast episode in itself, then I pick it up from there, flesh it out. And I love doing the recordings in the early mornings. So when I do my solo podcasts, I record them at those 4 a.m., 5 a.m. slots. And then, of course, Miraculous Beings happens depending on the guest speaker and their availability. Yeah, and pretty much it. I think I still edit the solo podcast myself. I don't hire anybody outside to do that. The video is something that is absolutely out of my depth, so that I do have external help in terms of fixing up the video, managing the transitions, and all of that. But yeah, that's the entire process of an episode coming out to you.
Wow. I think it gives so many interesting ideas. I love your idea of the WhatsApp group and, sort of a place for all the ideas, and revisiting those that place many times. We park them, but we don't revisit them. So that was really inspiring,
Yeah.
Shweta.
Yeah.
And from all these episodes, has there been one instance where a sentence, a quote, or an advice from a guest really stuck with you?
Oh, so many, so many. I can probably do a series of podcasts on just that because I feel like we've had some phenomenal guests on the show in terms of their thought processes, the kind of work that they do, their ideologies, and how they all link up. But I think three. When you asked me this question before, also when I had to really reflect on it, three things really stood out, which I'll probably share. One was what Prasad had shared in his episode, wherein he spoke about how imagine a fish swimming in the water. It is not just the fish that is swimming, but there is the current and there is a whole ecosystem supporting the fish in its act of swimming. And he gave that analogy to say that how we also in this life aren't really that alone, right? There is, if we were to look at life as a partnership between me and life, he said that we will not feel that alone and isolated. And like that fish in the water, we can take that support of the whole ecosystem to help us move forward. That was such a powerful analogy that that image is stuck in my head.
I
This,
love that.
I know, right? It is so, so powerful. And we've all had those moments where we feel so alone, like, uh, like a backs to the wall situation where you feel like, how are we going to get out of this? And somehow something happens and we make it through.
Yeah.
But if we were to appreciate that force and really be like co-creators with that uh, energy, I feel like there's so much we could do.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful. It's such a beautiful metaphor. And I think what it did for me was it instantly moved me into the role of an observer. I
Yeah.
got very curious that how would it be if we were observing that flow of the water,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
right? And then instead of resisting, sometimes unknowingly,
Yeah.
when we're not observing the flow or not looking at it as a partnership, we begin to resist it instead of co-creating with it. So I think this was amazing, amazing sharing, just beautiful. Loved what you shared. Shweta.
Yeah, and as you were sharing it, right? I think a lot of times, in a bit to protect ourselves, we build these walls around us, right? To constrict us, to protect us, and that's actually stopping the flow from helping us move forward in so many ways. That can we let the guards down?
Yes, and there's another insight that just came to me, Shweta, which was that it the metaphor also allows us to look at ourselves as a part of something bigger, right? A process that's already invoked rather than that separateness.
Yeah,
And I think, like you pointed out in the beginning when you were narrating this, um, that sort of makes us suddenly realize that, hey, we're not alone. We don't have to take all the burden of doership,
yeah.
right? So loved it. It's beautiful.
Absolutely, yeah, because I think it just all of us feel that pressure in terms of how are we going to make something happen. And I definitely felt it when the first time I saw the vision for Being Miraculous as being something more than me. I was
Mhm.
like, how is that even going to happen? I'm just the girl next door, and I don't know what it takes to do all of those things. But then when you realize that there is a larger force in play that is making things happen. Like, for example, there was this one time, I think, when I was asking these questions, saying, how can I be more an enabler for others in their journeys of self discovery? I had a series of coaches coming onto my platform saying that either they wanted to promote a course that they are offering or they wanted to offer a demo coaching to me. And I had never heard the word coaching until then. That was the first time in March or April 2020 when I heard and met coaches and had conversations. And that's how I actually got into coaching because even though I graduated from Excel, I was completely oblivious about coaching as a profession and things like that. And now when I look back at it, it looks almost serendipitous that when I was asking the answer question saying that how can I be more of an enabler to others, I met a series of coaches who guided me to Cocharya, and I actually did my training there. Right. So I think if we were to look back, there are so many of these little things that actually add up in supporting towards making our journey. We are just not alert enough to recognize those little miracles, I guess, on an everyday basis.
Oh, so yeah, I think you said it so beautifully. Because I think the joy of noticing those miracles itself
Yeah.
is such a beautiful experience to just notice those tiny miracles every day, which lead to something bigger.
Yeah.
I love doing that with myself and sort of going back, connecting the dots to how did I reach here, and it's just so much fun.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That's why I read there's always that helping hand. It's like an invisible helping hand, but there is that support always available.
Yeah, so true. And so there's another milestone, which is your book, which came out.
Yes.
I just reached me yesterday, and I wanted to sort of know how these three threads connect with each other. Your curiosity of trying to understand life, its meaning, your role. the podcast and the book.
Yeah.
So, how is, you know, tell us more about this intertwined journey.
Yeah, definitely intertwined in so many ways and levels. I jokingly say it, but I feel it, there is a lot of truth to it also. That I wrote this book for my 2016 self, saying that
Mhm,
if she had to figure out where to start when so many things were out of alignment, what would that look like?
mhm,
And I think that's where Far From Fine emerged, because if I look back at that time, I was so much on autopilot, continuously just going with whatever comes in my way, firefighting from one thing to the next without really questioning where all of this was adding up to, or really choosing my path forward.
mhm,
And the book definitely had its origins there. And I would say the podcast actually helped me write the book in a large way, because so many of the things that I talk in the book actually were explored as bite sized ideas in the podcast, wherein I really talk about, how do we usually approach our emotions, and is there a more conscious way of approaching our emotions?
mhm,
Or just this talk about how this whole analogy of how when we are in constant stress, we are actually causing the body so much duress when we are not able to switch off and really activate that parasympathetic nervous system. These are all ideas that I've probably explored in smaller bites and smaller corners through the podcast over the 3 years. And like I said, I told you, right? Like I remember all of these things because it got captured in a podcast somewhere at some point, because whatever eureka moment I had in that one moment 4 years ago is still available in my voice in the podcast. So it was very nice for me to go back to those insights to really feel where I was coming from, and then probably expand more on it in the book. And I would say the book writing also was a way to deepen my own quest for that life of meaning and purpose that I was talking about, because the book challenged me in a whole different level. While I thought I was making progress in my meditations, while I had faith in myself and was actually able to hold that space for others in their journey of discovery, still, when I started writing the book, so many demons came up that I was surprised. So much insecurity again, in terms of who am I to be writing this book? Do I know enough about life at 28 to write a book on this? What if it's already been said before?
mhm,
All of those were questions that came up and that would stop me from writing the book. And that would mean I'll have to go back to step one, to my quest, to resolve those answers, to deepen my faith, to deepen my belief, and then come back to the book writing process. So, in a way, I feel that those two are also very intertwined, because I really feel whatever ease and spaciousness that I feel today in my life also came from going through that journey in the book writing process, because it really helped weed out those doubts and insecurities to a much larger extent,
mhm,
to a space where I was just sharing this with somebody the other day that, you know, I needed to write the book to become the person I am today.
mhm.
And the book has its own journey now. That, I'm not even worried about who's going to read it, whether people are going to like it, because it's no longer about me. The book had to be birthed through me so that I learn my lessons. But the book is independent in itself in terms of what it has to do for the world, right? I don't think I would have been able to say that even 2 years ago. So I think that journey was necessary for me to level up in my own trust in myself, my own trust in the process,
Mhm,
to deepen my own spiritual practices, to be able to uh, not just say the words, but to really realize it at the depth of my being, to actually recognize that, yeah, I'm not anxious about it anymore.
mhm.
I think that has come a long way.
Yeah,
So yeah, so many intertwines. I think I can go on and on if I were to draw parallels, but safe to say that they are very much connected, and in a way, I feel each of them further the other. So now I have ideas about how I can do a series on intentional living in my podcast going forward, also.
yeah,
So they all kind of feed into each other.
yeah. Thanks for sharing, Shweta. And what's your message for your listeners on this very special day?
I think it's the message that I give through all my work in Being Miraculous, which is never settle.
Mm,
Never settle for anything but the best, because somewhere I feel we're all born for greatness and we shouldn't have to settle for mere existence or mediocrity at any level. It might seem scary, it might seem daunting, it might seem impossible at many points, but trusting that ecosystem to carry you forward, trusting that helping hand to support you, but to take those leaps of faith, because everything that I've enjoyed has come on the other side of fear.
mm. That's so powerful, what you just said. Thank you. Thank you. This has been an incredibly enriching conversation, Shweta. I learned so much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be with you on this very special episode. And thank you for helping me learn so much.
Thank you. Thank you for those beautiful questions. And I got to relive my journey too and see it in a different light through these prompts. So thank you so much. And thank you for making the 150th episode a bit more special.
Oh,
Thank you.
thank you.